My name is Rachel Bennett. I'm 34 years old, and I live in a quiet suburb outside Denver, Colorado. For most of my life, I believed family meant loyalty. I believed that no matter what happened, blood was supposed to protect you, not tear you apart. But 3 months ago, sitting in a cold lawyer's office, I learned just how wrong I was. If you had told me a year ago that my own sister would look me in the eyes and laugh at my pain, I would have called you a liar. But that's exactly what happened. And what came after still gives me chills every time I think about it. This is the story of how I lost everything I thought I had, and found something I never expected. Growing up, it was just me, my younger sister Diane, and our father, Frank Bennett. Our mother passed away when I was 12, so Dad raised us alone, working double shifts at his hardware store just to keep us fed and in decent clothes. Dad wasn't a rich man, but he was steady, honest, the kind of man who showed up early to help a neighbor fix a fence and never once asked for anything in return. I loved him fiercely for that. Diane was different. She was the golden child, charming, confident, always the center of attention at family dinners. I didn't resent her for it. I actually admired her boldness. I was the quiet one who stayed behind to help Dad balance the shop's books, while Diane went out and built a flashy life for herself. Designer bags, a luxury apartment downtown, a fiancé named Marcus, who worked in finance and never seemed to run out of money. I used to tell myself we were just different people, living different lives, but still a family underneath it all. I had no idea how wrong I was. The red flags started small, tiny comments here and there that I brushed off as jokes. "Still working at that dusty old shop with Dad?" Diane would say at dinner, laughing lightly, like it was nothing. "At least I'm actually there for him," I'd reply, trying to keep the peace. But over time, the comments got sharper. When Dad's health started declining 2 years ago, his heart, the doctor said, Diane visited less and less. She said she was busy with work, busy with wedding planning, busy with her new house. Meanwhile, I was the one driving him to appointments, managing his medications, sitting beside his hospital bed at 3 a.m. when the pain got bad. I didn't do it for recognition. I did it because he was my father, and I loved him. But I wish I had noticed the signs earlier, the way Diane's eyes would flicker with something unreadable whenever Dad mentioned the house, the store, or taking care of things properly. At the time, I thought it was guilt. I never imagined it was something else entirely. Dad passed away in early spring. It was peaceful, the way he always said he wanted it, at home, in his favorite chair, with soft music playing. I held his hand until the very end. The grief was the heaviest thing I've ever carried. But what came next made that grief feel almost small in comparison. A week after the funeral, Diane called me, not to grieve together, not to talk about Dad, but to talk about the will. "We should read it together," she said, her voice oddly light. "I already spoke to a lawyer. Don't worry, I've got everything handled." Something about the way she said handled made my stomach twist, but I told myself I was being paranoid. This was my sister. We had just lost our father. Surely grief was clouding my judgment, not hers. That's when everything changed. The day of the will reading, I sat in a small conference room with Diane, her fiancé Marcus, and a lawyer I had never met before, a man named Mr. Whitfield, who Diane introduced with unusual familiarity. Diane wore a designer black dress, sunglasses pushed up into her hair, sipping coffee like she was attending a business meeting rather than settling our father's final wishes. "You know," she said, leaning toward me with a small, tight smile, "Dad always said the house should go to whoever could actually maintain it properly. You'll never afford this house on your own, Rachel. Let's be realistic." I felt my chest tighten. "Diane, this isn't the time." "I'm just being honest," she said, waving her hand. "You've always been sentimental. I'm the practical one. It just makes sense." I sat there in stunned silence, grief and humiliation crashing over me at once. The house wasn't just wood and walls to me. It was where Dad taught me to ride a bike, where we ate dinner every single night after Mom passed, where I held his hand as he took his last breath. And here was my sister, dismissing all of it with a laugh, like I was a child begging for a toy I couldn't afford. I wanted to scream. I wanted to walk out. But I stayed, because some small part of me still hoped Dad's true wishes would set things right. I had no idea just how right I was. Mr. Whitfield cleared his throat and opened a thick folder. "Before we begin," he said calmly, "I need to clarify something. Frank Bennett updated his will 8 months ago. This is not the version Diane provided to my office." Diane's smile faltered. What? That's not possible. I have the documents right here. Those documents are outdated, Mr. Whitfield said, his tone firm but polite. Your father visited my office personally in October, alone. He specifically requested this update be kept confidential until today. The room went silent. Diane's confidence cracked, just slightly, like a hairline fracture in glass. Mr. Whitfield continued reading. According to the updated will, the house, the store, and the majority of Frank Bennett's savings were left entirely to me, Rachel Bennett, in recognition of her presence, her care, and her unwavering loyalty during his final years. Diane's face went pale. That's a mistake. There has to be a mistake. There's no mistake, Mr. Whitfield said. Your father was very clear. He said, and I quote, "My daughter Rachel showed up when it mattered. This house should belong to someone who understands what it truly means." I sat frozen, tears filling my eyes. Not from vindication, but from the overwhelming realization that even in his final months, my father had seen everything. He had seen the sacrifices. He had seen the neglect. And he had made sure the truth would come out exactly when it needed to. I want to be clear. I didn't come to that room seeking revenge. I came seeking closure. But watching Diane's carefully built world crack open in front of me, I realized something. The truth itself was the only justice I needed. Diane, however, didn't see it that way. "This isn't over," she hissed at me after the meeting, gripping her purse so tightly her knuckles turned white. "I'll contest this. I'll get lawyers. You don't deserve any of this." I could have argued. I could have matched her anger with my own. Instead, I simply said, "Dad already made his choice, Diane. Maybe it's time you asked yourself why." But secretly, I knew there was more to uncover. Something about Diane's reaction, the panic beneath her anger, told me this wasn't just about hurt feelings. It was about something she desperately wanted to hide. Over the following weeks, I worked quietly with Mr. Whitfield to fully understand Dad's estate. That's when we discovered something Diane never expected us to find. Months before his passing, Dad had noticed unauthorized withdrawals from a joint account he shared with Diane. Money meant for his medical care, quietly redirected to cover Diane and Marcus's mounting debts. Nearly $40,000 moved in small amounts over almost a year. Dad hadn't confronted her directly. Instead, he documented everything, kept every bank statement, and handed it all to Mr. Whitfield with clear instructions. "If she contests the will, use this." Not out of anger, but so she finally understands why I made this choice. I didn't feel joy uncovering this. I felt heartbreak, imagining my father silently carrying this betrayal in his final year, protecting Diane's image right up until the end, hoping she'd change on her own. She never did. When Diane followed through on her threat and filed a legal challenge to contest the will, everything came out in mediation. The withdrawals, the falsified expense reports, the pattern of financial dependence she had hidden from everyone, including Marcus. Marcus, blindsided by the revelations about their shared debts and Diane's secrecy, ended their engagement just 2 weeks later. The life Diane had built, the designer apartment, the flashy image, began quietly collapsing around her. I take no pleasure in saying this. I never wanted her life to fall apart. I only wanted the truth to be seen. And once it was, Diane had no more room left to hide behind charm and confidence. The legal challenge was withdrawn within a month. There was nothing left to fight for. The truth had already spoken for itself. Today, I still live in that house, the one Diane once laughed and said I'd never afford. I've turned Dad's old study into a small reading nook filled with his favorite books and the photo of us on the porch the summer before Mom passed. Diane and I don't speak much anymore. Every now and then, she sends a short message, an apology that never quite says the words directly. I don't know if we'll ever fully repair what broke between us, but I've made peace with that. If there's one thing this experience taught me, it's this. The people who truly see you rarely need to announce it loudly. My father never once told me he noticed my sacrifices. He simply made sure that, in the end, the truth would speak for him. And sometimes, that's the most powerful kind of justice there is. Not revenge, not anger, but simply the truth finally coming home.